Hello, everyone. I am throwing it back today with a review of an album from the early 2000s that I've been wanting to cover on this channel for quite some time. However, it's an album that, although old, I'd only actually recently listened to the full body of work for the first time. It is absolutely insane to me that this album has slipped through the cracks for so long for me. And there are a lot of early 2000s projects that I've been listening to recently for the first time, and it's just blowing my mind because it's over 15, almost 20 years since this album came out. And this is an artist who I have loved for a long time. This is, of course, Avril Lavigne, and I'm going to be talking about her debut record, Let Go, which was released on June 4th, 2002. This is an album I have a really interesting relationship with, as it's a record that I have heard snippets and parts of, songs from it, throughout the course of my life. The first one being, of course, the hit single Complicated. Everyone's heard that song. It was huge all over the radio. It was her breakthrough smash. Hearing it probably all the way back to when it was first released. As well as Skater Boy. That was a song I definitely heard before. I mean, everyone knows about those two songs. Those two songs, of course, are what most people think of when they think of Avril Lavigne. And of course, her earlier stuff was really, really popular. And it sort of defined the sort of early 2000s punk rock, Green Day, My Chemical Romance, All American Rejects. Like, there was this, like, scene of, like, not quite so grunge, but like still punk music that was like a little bit more pop and mainstream, but it was still rock and roll. It was still kind of alternative. Avril was the spearhead for a lot of this. And so many acts can trace, inspirations to what Avril was doing, and I'm very impressed with, the longevity of her career and the trajectory of it. I have reviewed her most recent record, Head Above Water. It's actually, believe it or not, the only Avril Lavigne full-length album I have reviewed on this channel. And again, that's not because I'm not as big a fan of Avril as I am of other artists. First of all, like I said, the only other full-length album I'd heard was her 2013 record, which is her self-titled, which, to be completely honest with you, I don't expect to ever cover on this channel. Not to say that it's a bad record, but when you line up all of Avril's albums, I hate to say it, but I do think her self-titled is probably her weakest. There's just a lot of filler tracks on there. It's an album that feels a little bit misplaced in terms of her identity, her being at that time 30 years old, but making music that felt very sort of like something a 16-year-old would make. There was just a lot of disconnect with some of it, and there were some experimental electronic pop elements that I don't think flew over so well. I don't think it's terrible by any means, but it's just not that memorable of a record for her. Another album that's horrifically slept on from her is Goodbye Lullaby. I'd actually not sat through and listened to the entire project until a few weeks ago. And although I'd heard almost every single song before then, when it came out in 2011, that album is criminally underrated. I'm sure, I get why some people think there's some things that are just too cheesy pop, too bubblegum, too, for teenage girls, for them to be, interested. But honestly, that record has some beautiful crafted soaring melodies, some really heartfelt moments. And it actually has, I feel like, out of all of her previous the most reminiscent of her first two records. And of course, those are the albums that everyone talks about when they think of old school Avril, and that's Let Go and Under My Skin. And those are two albums that I promise you I am going to cover, and I'm covering one of them right now. I also will review Under My Skin, because I love that record as well. There's the whole conspiracy that, of course, Avril died not long after Let Go was released, or more like what would make sense, not long after Under My Skin was released, because Under My Skin and Let Go feel like very much companion projects, although Under My Skin is arguably even more dark, even more punk rock. The guitars are just heavier. It's a heavier record. And Let Go almost has a little bit more of a country sound. It's got a twang to it that is not redneck. It's not cheesy to the people, to people who don't like country. I don't think it's going to offend them, but it has, I guess it sounds very Michelle Branch. It just has a much more sort of like smooth, easy listening guitar feel, whereas like Under My Skin was like her like real Green Day moment, so to speak, if you want to call it that. Both were amazing projects, but I do think that Let Go is a little bit more iconic just because it carries some of those classic Avril songs. But anyway, getting back to it, by the way, if you look at Avril's career, there are elements of those first two records. I know people think the conspiracy, which has kind of died down. I don't think people are so caught up in that anymore. That was so like 2013 or 14, whatever. But yeah, of course, people think that Avril's like completely been replaced by some generic blonde girl, some dumb blonde, to quote her new song. But the truth is that you can hear traces of the old Avril throughout all of her more recent projects. Avril's grown up. She recorded Let Go when she was mostly 16, 17 years old. And you could tell that like she was in a very kind of grittier place, like feeling like she was not fitting in, dealing with first heartbreaks. It's going to carry a different aesthetic than some of her later works, which I would say don't always necessarily feel more mature, but they definitely feel like seasoned in a way that this album just feels so fresh and raw. And I do think that that's something that people miss about some of her stuff. The grittiness, the undertones, you know, the scene element to it. That's the right way to describe it. Something that's important to remember is that Avril had a history of, as a teenager, performing at country festivals or at country fairs. So the Faith Hill type vibe, which is what some of her fellow songwriters that she and producers she worked with in the early days quoted as her having, is very eminent in that, you know, there is this real stripped back, almost country sound to a lot of her songs that I just find so refreshing because it's country, but it's also so punk rock alternative at the same time. You could not really call it country, but it has that easy, airy sort of sound that you don't see so much with artists that are in a similar vein. I guess Michelle Branch would be the only other one I would sort of think of in that space. Maybe even Hilary Duff was doing a little bit of that as well. The album was originally going to be titled Anything But Ordinary off of one of the songs on the record. But last minute, Avril decided to change it to Let Go, which is actually a demo that was featured on one of Avril Lavigne's B-side albums, which I have not heard, and I'm only just figuring out about this and doing the research. Most of these songs were written and produced by Avril herself, along with the group The Matrix. In Los Angeles, she recorded a lot of the songs with them. She also worked with Cliff Magnus when she was doing some of those earlier songs with Arista Records, which is the Island Records imprint that she was signed to by L.A. Reid when she was discovered. So looking at the album art, we get this image of a girl who's lost in the mix, lost in the hustle and bustle, transitioning from being a girl to being a woman, going through those tumultuous teenage years. The way she dresses, you know, the heavy eyeliner, the like very, very straight in your front of the face hairstyle. The crossed arms, the convert, you know, the heavy boots, the black, the baggier clothing, something that, of course, Billie Eilish is emulating with her fashion style nowadays, gives Avril this, like I said, this image or this persona of someone who just doesn't give an F. Who's here to disrupt, who's here to, you know, show that emo and that, you know, depressing kind of alternative stuff can be really mainstream and really appealing to a lot of teenagers who are going through similar things. And so, of course, instantly gratifying and pulling you into the, of course, with the message of Let Go, you get this sort of idea of like some sort of existential break from the status quo or something that feels oppressive, this feeling of letting go, of expanding out and just becoming the most, you know, unapologetic version of yourself, being more raw, more vulnerable, more chaotic, and dwelling on that and not being afraid and trying to be this picture perfect beauty queen, which was something that, you know, the Britney Spears were definitely spearheading. And then there was Avril, who was like putting away from that. Pink as well, to a certain degree. The first track, Losing Grip, which was actually the fourth single released off of this record, is interesting because I think that if you look at the chronology of the singles, you know, Complicated was released first. L.A. Reid obviously felt like that song was more accessible and was like going to target the audience they wanted. It's supposedly cross-demographic in terms of its appeal, but you can tell that that song is definitely geared towards the mall. It's always a song that you hear at like, you know, a Forever 21 or an Urban Outfitters or like that kind of teen mall environment. Complicated, you know, it's a simple but yet very sort of well-written, earnest expression of frustration with a boyfriend that so many could relate to, that I think just made it this cross-generational appeal, because it was just like everyone can relate to these lyrics no matter what age you are. Even if you're not in high school dealing with, you know, 17-year-old boys, uh, as an older person, you can appreciate that, like, this is a theme and songwriting that definitely feels, and I think there's something, very specific about her songwriting that comes from like this kind of country sound that she has that makes it so accessible because she really like pulls you into the songwriting. Take off all your preppy clothes. You're not fooling anyone. Um, these anecdotal sort of references to real life that we all can just sort of relate to makes Avril so much more uh, easy to embrace and like fall in love with. Not to mention the sort of snarky, what you're yelling for, you're not fooling anyone. You're so boring. You look like a fool to me. Like she's not here to play around and to, placate the sweet talkers, and she's here to like I said, F up the system, and she's here to provide a dose of reality to some of these people whose egos and narcissism has bloated to an exceedingly high level. Skater Boy, which is track 3, was the second single. And again, so I said I already talked about these songs. They're very MTV. She's referencing that. She's talking about growing up and sort of being inspired by like, and also kind of sexually aroused by like a certain type of guy that she's really into and sort of playing off of that. I think she creates that sort of scene so well in that song. I don't have too much more to say. Again, songs I'd heard early on. Now, track number 4, I'm With You, was the next song that I heard off of this record. But believe it or not, I did not hear this song until, gosh, I think it was when it was January of 2008, and it was in ninth grade. And I found this song on AOL Music, back when AOL Music was still a thing. And it was one of the places that I remember in 2007, 2008, I discovered so much music from. Keep in mind, I was very late to discovering pop music, obviously, because at that point, this song was already over 5 years old. But I saw the music video and I heard the song, and it just, no, I can't explain to you just like what hearing this song for the first time felt like. This has been considered one of her most classic uh, anthemic iconic songs. A lot of people have been like, why didn't you even release this song first? Like this would have had even more appeal because it is just so well written, so exquisite and divine in its sound, in its genre, in its everything. And so I will never get tired of listening to it. It's definitely a wintry song. I mean, I love the visual of her in that very sort of urban but sort of bleak winter environment, feeling all alone while all the kids are partying. It was definitely an aesthetic that I so related to at that point in my life. I completely felt lost and alone, and I just was like, where is my other half? Not even romantically, but just like someone, like as a friend, who can be with me. And I'm calling out to you in the middle of the night in this bleak environment while everyone's getting drunk and stoned out of their minds. I love the image of her sitting at the bar looking all depressed, and everyone else is just like around her in a blur, drinking and having fun. Like that image was so iconic to me in terms of representing how I felt about the mainstream sort of uh, party culture that I never felt like I fully fit in with. And I just always was like yearning for that one person I could have that close connection with. Whereas in like that environment, there's just like so many people around you, you get completely overwhelmed. So viscerally connecting is this track for me. I mean, the soaring melodies, the gorgeous silky smooth vocals that like pierce through. Like I said, Avril has a voice that feels very crystal clear to me, and it pierces through. Like it has this like magnetic aura around it. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's very piercing and clear and crisp. And she delivers it so emotionally that it's just it's combined with the visuals is so empowering and so melancholically, relatable. I don't know who you are, but I'm with you. I don't know at the end of the day who it is going to be that's going to come out of the shadows and resonate with me and save me from this darkness. Is it even going to be a person, or is it myself? I think that her new song, It Was In Me, which comes off of her newest record, is definitely an answer song to that one. I've talked about that in my Head Above Water review. It's sort of like her talking now about how all these years later, she realized the person she was looking for to bring her out of this darkness was within her all along. And so it is the perfect answer song for the 35-year-old Avril to come back to the 17-year-old Avril and say, look, I found this thing you were looking for finally, and you can hear that catharsis and the answer to the question that was posed all those years ago. So my two favorite Avril Lavigne songs back to back, It Was In Me and I'm With You. I have made a video on my channel where I rank the top 10 Avril Lavigne songs in my opinion. Now keep in mind this was before Head Above Water, the album, came out. So that list is probably adjusted somewhat now because It Was In Me will definitely be in that list. But I did put I'm With You, spoiler alert, at number 1. I do recommend you check out that video, but I definitely have a lot of good things to say about that track. Okay, so I mentioned Losing Grip. That's track number 1. This was a song I had only recently heard. So basically the chronology of me listening to this album is like I heard I'm With You in 2008. I heard Complicated Skater Boy way, way, way before that. In 2015, I'd like to say, I think I heard the songs My World and Anything But Ordinary. Basically because at that point I just wanted to revisit the album. I was like, look, there's got to be some old songs on here that are great. And those were the two, upon listening to all the previews, that stood out to me the most. And so those two songs are definitely highlights for me on this record, and I have the most positive things to say about those two songs, My World in particular. And so I listened to those. And then it wasn't until like literally a month and a half ago that I finally went through and I was just like, I'm going to listen to this whole record, finally, for the first time, from Losing Grip all the way to Naked, the final song, and it was just like, oh my god, what have I been sleeping on? I can somewhat understand why a lot of some of these songs didn't jump out to me when I was younger. I feel like my taste has changed as I've gotten a little bit more I've embraced more alternative music. I was definitely looking out for the big pop hooks in the beginning, so I understand why some of the poppier songs jumped out to me more than some of the more alternative punk rock songs. So I definitely can see why it took me longer to get into a song like Losing Grip, for example. Losing Grip is one of the heaviest songs on this record. It's so guitar-laden, it's so emotionally charged, and so raw and ominous. I love it though. I mean, I feel the energy now of that track. It summarizes and enters us into this album so wonderfully because it brings about like everything you would imagine when you look at that album cover. It just is there, like it speaks to you, and it's just like, I get this. I get like how I'm getting lost in this whirlwind that is life, and I'm losing grip on reality. I'm losing grip on my sanity. I'm losing grip on hope and love. And I'm trying to figure out how to keep my head above water, further reference. As she delivers the verses before the chorus, I mean, she's so raw and earnest in her delivery. I mean, you can just hear the frown on her face as she sings these lyrics. Am I just some chick you place beside you to take somebody's place? When you turn around, can you recognize my face? You used to love me, you used to hug me, but that wasn't the case. Everything wasn't okay. I was left to cry there, waiting outside there, grinning with a lost stare. That's when I decided, why should I care? Because you weren't there when I was scared. I was so alone. You need to listen. I'm starting to trip. I'm losing my grip, and I'm in this thing alone. And that's, of course, the wailing, rocky, tumultuous chorus that is so addictive and like so alluring because of its energy. Mobile. Okay, another song that I wish I had heard way sooner, because this is a song that bridges, I think, that sort of country twang meets punk rock alternative guitar-laden song. It's more acoustic-laden, meets the pop aesthetic that she's become well known for. This song crashes and burns like waves upon a shore, and then it finds its moments of levity in the bridge, and everything's stripped back and airier. And she lets her voice become more of a, lighter, lilting head voice for that brief moment before she pounds back into that slight southern twang in her delivery as she belts these lyrics out. Everything's changing when I turn around, all out of my control. I'm immobile. I love verse 2. Start back at this life, stretch myself back into the vibe. I'm waking up to say I've tried instead of waking up to another TV guide. It's time now to turn around, turn and walk on this crazy ground. This song so brilliantly encapsulates the feeling of young, transitioning from a teenager to being an adult. I feel like this song so brilliantly illustrates your early 20s. And I know she wrote this song way before she was 20, but there's something about this track that just, I feel like I'm still a part of it in a way. The fast-paced nature of life and of realizing responsibility and like all of these things that are changing around you, friends that are moving away, things that are feeling as though they're out of your control for the first time ever since you've left your parents' house. The energy that is encapsulated in this song, it's like it's celebratory, but at the same time, it's like a sad plea for help. It's a brilliant sort of walk the line between complete, cataclysmic depression and ecstatic euphoria because you're finally free. It's freeing and it's caging at the same time. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's the cacophony of all of this amazing, like rockier edged country guitar laden with all of the acoustic elements and the lighter sort of briefer moments of levity that she brings with her voice in the production. I I don't know how else to say, but this is one of the best songs in this record for me, and probably my second favorite after I'm With You. But again, it's a song I heard all these years later, and it's so criminal that I slept on for so long. Track number 6, Unwanted. One of the more edgy, hard rock sounding songs on this record. She really belts this out. She really kind of, flirts with that heavy metal aesthetic, but starts out with this sort of skittering, what I guess would be some sort of synthesizer, but it could be an electric guitar, pulsating us into this. In the chorus, she screams, "You don't know me, don't ignore me, you don't want me there, you just shut me out. If you had your way, you just shut me up and make me go away. No, I just don't understand why you won't talk to me. It hurts that I'm so unwanted for nothing. Don't talk words against me. I wanted to know you." I mean, this is like so tragic to listen to because we all can relate to just someone who's just suddenly shut us out and we're completely confused as to, and we take it really personally, as to why they've decided we're for some reason disposable to them. Like we're not as important as we once thought we were. And so the desperation is so strong on this track, and I think it's brilliantly translated. And like I said, a moment that's definitely more about that rockier energy than about that soaring, catchy pop chorus that's accessible. But there's nothing wrong with that. Track number 7, Tomorrow. So this song starts out, and I'm just like, is this a Taylor Swift song? Like that strumming acoustic guitar is so country. And that's again where I was just completely floored by having no idea that Avril had such a country backing to her. But like I said, it just works so well. And this song is more subdued. It's more relaxed. I mean, it's her, still in a very sort of darker place, frustrated with a partner who's not giving them quite the clear answers they wish they would get. I want to believe you when you tell me that it'll be okay. I try to believe you, but I just don't. When you say that it's going to be, it always turns out to be a different way. I try to believe you, but not today. But I don't know how I'll feel tomorrow. So acknowledging that the fickle nature of especially the teenage mind and of romance can change like the wind. And so this song has that sort of whimsical, sort of airier, I'm just sort of going with the flow feel that I think fits the sort of state of mind that she was in when she wrote this. Anything But Ordinary, track 8. A brilliant depiction of her kind of describing herself, and also describing the sort of existential crisis that she finds herself in with society and wanting to deviate from what she thinks of as like so bland and so boring, like how everyone else just follows the status quo. Is it enough to love? Is it enough to breathe? Somebody rip my heart out and leave me here to bleed. Is it enough to die? Somebody save my life. I'd rather be anything but ordinary, please. To walk within the lines would make my life so boring. I want to know that I have been to the extreme. So knock me off my feet. Come on now, give it to me. Anything to make me feel alive. I feel every single ounce of these lyrics. Like this is just so relatable, so true, and so important for people who are realizing that, it's so easy to get bogged down by how everyone acts the same and people can really kind of be cliquey and all kind of judgmental about, comparing everyone to everyone else. Asking, but isn't it just enough to breathe? Isn't it enough to love? Isn't it enough to just be myself? And at the end of the day, if that's too much to ask, then I don't want a part of this society at all. I, don't care. You can rip my heart out, leave me here to bleed. At least I felt something, And there's a real desperate plea here. I mean, I can tell that Avril's gone through some really heavy, probably some suicidal thoughts and feelings around being, depressed and struggling with fitting in and feeling like no one really understands you. You don't understand this world. You don't want to be a part of it. It just all bogs you down. And so, saying, is it enough to die? Is somebody saved my life? You might think that, like, oh gosh, this isn't something I would take too seriously, but she probably really did feel these things. At the same time as saying, is it enough to love? Is it also enough to die? Am I really that important, or is anything that important to anyone anymore? And so there is this sort of nihilism of like, nothing really matters in this song. The only thing that matters is that I try and I love and probably get stomped all over, but it's better than not doing anything. And I think that the bridge is where she's really kind of letting herself realize this. Let down your defenses, use no common sense. If you look, you will see that this world is a beautiful accident, turbulent, succulent, opulent, permanent. No way. I want to taste it. Don't want to waste it away. This is where her songwriting really shines. I mean, I think this is probably one of her strongest written songs, along with My World, in that it just so brilliantly depicts, almost in a completely poetic way, the utter frustration existentially that we all have, like a lot of us struggling with depression, struggling with fitting in, like I said, in society, and wanting someone on a knight in shining armor to come and save us, but at the same time knowing we have to do a lot of the work ourselves. Sometimes I get so weird I even freak myself out. I laugh myself to sleep. It's my lullaby. Like I just these lyrics just encapsulate everything that is, someone growing up with, like heavy depression, well, depression or depressive tendencies and feelings of possibly bipolar disorder, or someone who's definitely kind of confused and unsure of where they fit in. It's just like, yeah, everything about this song. I don't know what else to say. It's got a really catchy, wonderful hook to it that actually feels very kind of Hilary Duffy, but I don't mind it. It's like much more teen girl bubblegum sounding, but it's perfect because the lyrics are so dark and heavy, and yet she's singing in this kind of high pitched girly voice over this sort of like really carefree, like acoustic guitar. Is it enough to die? It's like, oh my God, this girl is like at once being so poppy and like preppy, and at the same time being so dark and like heavy metal. And I just love it. I love that juxtaposition. Things I'll Never Say. Again, this is another kind of just like easy and breezy song. Like I said, this album is like a blend of, and probably her most, as I said, country record, in that it has a lot of these songs that just sort of cruise by. They're the perfect song to just like roll down the window to and just like roll down that summer highway and listen to, because I felt that vibe so much when I was listening to this record. And the whirlwind romance, the idealism of like finding your partner and then being also at the same time all closed off to them, because you realize that like you're scared to be so vulnerable and wear your heart on your sleeve. You don't want to tell them like, I want to marry you today, but that's what your heart's really saying. I want to sleep with you every night. Like all these things I'll never say, but could you read between the lines? Could you pick up that I'm this crazy about you? I think we all second guess ourselves there and think, gosh, I wish I could be more open about just how much I love this person. But I'm so scared to be that vulnerable and let them in and see that. My World, track 10. Oh my goodness. This is like autobiographical. It talks about how she comes from this small town in Ontario, of 5,000 people in Napanee. It talks about how, it took her 5,000 hours to get her hair straight, doing her hair in the bathroom, how she would lay underneath the Milky Way and dream of her life away. There's something so whimsical and so um, heartwarming about this track. I mean, it just is so feel good. And yet at the same time, like still sort of dark and depressive in parts. But just explaining how, like, at the end of the day, she just gets lost in her own little world. And, Avril, it's kind of funny because, I mean, I do think that some of her songs make her seem like she wants, like, that she's this, like, popular girl who's, like, desired by lots of guys and is, like, constantly, partying and out drinking with her friends. And that's true. I'd say Avril is pretty extroverted, but she's not the most party kind of she's not the most extroverted girl you'd find out there. There's an introverted side to Avril where she just is by herself, and especially growing up just like wishing upon the stars, like getting lost in her own fantasy world. And always being in a daze, always being in a haze. Can't help it that I always space and I daydream. Like, girl, I feel you. I'm always daydreaming, always got my heads in the clouds, and that's a wonderful place to be in, except it makes us very forgetful, and we're not so reliable on certain things like showing up on time and making sure we don't forget our wallets and things like that. But we got to work on that. But still, I mean, this is just like it's so co-resonant for me, this song. And when I heard it and the crashing guitars and like the feel of it, it just felt very outdoorsy. It felt like a kind of campfire song, but in a good way, not cheesy at all. This song just feels like a road trip song, you know? And a lot of these songs feel like that to me. It's just like I want to get my close friends and just blare these songs out the window as we drive up to upstate New York or something in the summertime. You know, like that's just the feel and vibe of this record. Nobody's Fool, again, just like a really powerful statement of a song, playing off of like, you know, guys who they think they can like turn her into something else or, you know, make her do things that she doesn't want to do. And she's like, I'm nobody's fool. You can't, you know, you can't manipulate me. Don't try. Don't even try. Like, seriously, Avril comes across as someone you don't want to play around with. She really does. And so, again, like I said, like her very sort of like, sarcastic, witty, you know, oh, I'm so over this type of tone in her voice because you can hear that as she sings, like, I'm not the milk and Cheerios in your spoon. It's not a simple here we go, not so soon. I might have fallen for that when I was 14 and a little more green, but it's amazing what a couple of more years can mean. If you're trying to turn me into someone else, it's easy to see I'm not down with that because I'm nobody's fool. And, you know, just like letting that chorus just like stick in your memory. Too Much to Ask. This song has definitely that edgier sound coming back. A slight sort of darker, you know, key change that's kind of under the surface where it's like, it seems like on the, you know, it seems like it's going to be light, but then it's like, oh no, this has got like this murkier sort of electronic guitar underneath. Some really great chords. I love the opening lyric. She says, it's funny when you think it's going to work out till you chose weed over me. You're so lame. Oh my God. Thank you, Avril, for preaching that because there have been so many instances where I've wanted to say that exact same thing. It's just lame. Like, I'm sorry. Like, nothing against weed, but I do think a lot of people use it as an escape mechanism to avoid actually trying to be in a relationship with someone. Like, weed is not going to, if you want weed to be your boyfriend, then don't pretend that, you know, you're looking for someone because you were devoted to that stuff. You are, you know, I can't deal with that. I thought you were cool until the point, but up until the point you didn't call me when you said you would. I finally figured out you're all the same, always coming up with some kind of story. Amen to that. I will, no matter what age I am, always probably relate to this, sadly, because guys are all the same and they all will, uh, they'll all just drop and leave you for, you know, something more convenient. Sorry, it's the truth. I mean, she's really kind of, this song just speaks to so much of how I feel about relationships right now. Is it's just like, you know, is it just too much to ask for me to try and connect with you, for me to try and get your walls to come down? You act so tough and loveless, and it's just not cool. It's so lame that you're just like, I'm too cool for love, I'm too cool for emotions. It's like, no, this is actually like attractive, and like if you actually were more open about it, girls would like you more, but instead you're just a dick. And you know, you're just using us, and I don't have time for this. But like at the same time, like I'm still trying to make you smile. I'm still there for you because I have this need in me to like want to help people. You know, I want them to recognize their true potential. It's like Avril, he's not worth it. It is too much to ask, unfortunately, with these guys. Closing track, Naked. I think it's a brilliant sort of a summarization of all of the existential angst that she's, you know, describing in these songs. I wake up in the morning, put on my face, the one that's going to get me through the day, through another day. Doesn't really matter how I feel inside because life is like a game sometimes. But then you came around me, the walls just disappeared, nothing to surround me and keep me from my fears. I'm unprotected. See how I've opened up. Oh, you've made me trust because I've never felt like this before. I'm naked around you. Does it show? You see right through me and I can't hide. I'm naked around you and it feels so right. That's true love for sure. I mean, maybe it's not always so great of a thing that you realize you're that vulnerable that someone sees right through you. But usually when you feel as though you can be yourself and you do feel naked and it will feel kind of shocking at first, you'll realize just how comfortable you are with yourself around that person. You don't have to feel like you put on this face every morning and put in all this effort to try and prove to someone that you're something that you're not. You don't have to spend all this time playing these games of like self-preservation and work correcting what you think in your head and you say. Like, you just can be yourself. It's more natural and smooth, but it's scary at first because you do feel so vulnerable and left out suddenly in the open, like, oh my God, they're seeing everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. And Avril's doing that on this record. Avril is, to a record label that is very kind of mainstream LA, materialistic, very much catered to the common denominator pop music type station with LA Reid. She's putting out a record that is unapologetically naked and bare, but so full of soul. Like, this record is just, so full of this want and drive and urge to see a brighter tomorrow, but understanding that, like, there is so much heaviness in this world and so much that you have to fight up against, and it's so hard and and it's like tiring and it drags and it sucks, and you are, experimenting and playing with all of that and the sounds and exploration of this record by creating it. It's cathartic. I feel all of that on this record so much, and it's just all wrapped up in a pretty accessible but still grungy, murkier, full of depth undertone that I think is the more resonant part of this record. It just helps that there are some amazing pop hooks on this record, for sure. Like I said, Anything But Ordinary, one of the standouts, and I'm With You, just it's like movie soundtrack level, like epic. Like, it's just like a chorus that I could only dream I could ever compose. Like, it's so well produced, so well made, and so emotional that it's just like gives me chills every time I hear it. I'll never get over it. Um, to the sort of more kind of alternative rock songs like Complicated, Skater Boy, Nobody's Fool, Too Much to Ask. Like, this record gives something for the alternative listener that will still appreciate some pop, some country, but some heavier sounds, some heavier guitars. It's just this brilliant sort of statement record, and it's just probably her best for that reason. Like, most people will say, was pretty critically acclaimed. I think her songwriting is way stronger than a lot of the critics give her credit for. She was younger when she wrote this stuff, but it's not all that simple, the songwriting. Like, I think that, the metaphors and everything, they're not as rich as you would expect someone at 16 or 17 to write, but it's like, it tells it as it is. There's no beating around the bush with any of these lyrics. Like, it's just upfront and brutally honest, and I really appreciate that about it, because that's not necessarily something that should go away as you mature. A lot of times, I feel like artists think that to mature, they have to, obscure their songwriting more by making it more, embellished with metaphor and with allegory and anecdotes. But I really do think that, like, sometimes getting straight to the point, but like cutting those, making those lyrics really hit home is something that you can really sell a lot more easily and make a song more memorable because of. So between the lyrics and the sonics, this album just delivers so much, and I'm so glad I am finally on board with it because it took way too long for me to finally discover. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comments what your favorite songs are. Like I said, I'm With You, forever and always the best. But other favorites, My World, Mobile, oh my God, love, love, love Mobile. Anything But Ordinary, Losing Grip. Complicated is, of course, a classic. I'd also say I think Nobody's Fool, and probably the closing track just because of the lyrical content. Unwanted, like, all of these songs, they're real standouts. Like, there's very few songs on this record that I'm not, like, wanting to never listen to again. Like, there's almost no filler either. It's a really cohesive but really strong body of work. So thank you all so much for watching. Check out my Head Above Water review if you have not. And like I said, stay tuned for an Under My Skin review in sometime in the hopefully not too distant future. Thank you all so much for watching. Peace, love, and light. Bye.